We are about to start the meeting in Glen. The topic today is benefits of reopening Northern Railway line from Armidale to Wollongara. We have a large crowd here, and you can already hear the sounds and noises. But in a minute or so, we will start the proceedings. Uh, Karin will be the chair and she will manage the meeting.
Good evening. Hi. Thank you for giving me your attention because as you can see we don't have a microphone. We were meant to be in a different room with a microphone and that didn't work out. So it's great if we can be heard. My name is Karen von Strookirch and I'll be chairing this meeting tonight. And my role is simply to introduce people and keep things moving along. And firstly, I'd just like to make you feel really welcome. We're very happy to see so many people here tonight, that so many people in Glen are interested in this topic of why we need the trains back on the main North Line. You may not, all of you may agree with that title, but we're glad to have you here either way. And we
Thanks,
also,
Steve.
pardon? We did also issue invitations to state parliamentarians to join us here tonight, and such as the Minister for Transport, Regional Transport, Sam Faraway, the Shadow Minister, Jenny Atchison, Adam Marshall, some Green members of Parliament, Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party were invited, and another National Party representative. And they were all unable to come because Parliament is in fact sitting this week. So that's why we haven't got those high-level politicians with us here tonight. But we're very pleased to see that the Mayor of Glen Innes, Rob Bannum, has been able to join us. And I gather that several other Glen Innes councillors are here as well. So thank you very much for coming. We're really glad to see you here. And the way that proceedings are going to go is that we're going to have the speakers first. We've got a wide range of speakers who are going to speak on different topics that they have particular expertise on. And then at the end of the speakers, then we will open the floor to the public, to the audience, to ask questions or make brief comments, join in the discussion about this topic. But you just hold off those questions and comments till we've got through our speakers first. So thank you very much for that. And now I'd like to welcome Alkira Blair Bain to the lectern to give us acknowledgement.
Yama, hello. Naya Gulbia. Ninde Nua. Garayada Ine Nale. Gunia Nyama Niani Gamaliga. Manibada Bea Ganiagu Nyama Nagurumbu. Bara Nama Niani Winingai. Galinga Manabadaban Ide Bade Gunamayan Gunima. I welcome you here today to this place that we gather on, this spiritual place in the Ngurumbu people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with country and our Mother Earth. I acknowledge the elders of both past and present and the young emerging.
And now I'd like to welcome Siri Game to the lectern, and he's going to outline the campaign of the Northern Railway Defenders Forum to date, so you can understand the background to this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Welcome, everyone. My name is Siri Gamage, as you probably know by now, and I represent Northern Railway Defenders Forum. I am the co-convener of that forum, and this fellow here, Matthew Tierney, is the other co-convener. And actually, I am a new comer to this particular campaign from last year, but people like Matthew and Rob Lennon and others here in the audience, they have been campaigning for this kind of rail line here and train services for a long time. And actually, I understand that Matthew was one of the key people who organized the campaign to get the rail train back to Armidale when the government stopped train services to Armidale. So what I will do within the probably 4 minutes left, what I will do is I will explain briefly what are the forum objectives, and then I will say a little bit about what we have been doing since last year, and then our beliefs and views a little bit in short, and our approach or the mission in regard to this particular subject, and then of course some factors to consider in our discussions, deliberations tonight. So in terms of the forum's objectives today, what we really wanted to do was to bring together those who are knowledgeable or have an interest on this particular issue, basically the Northern Railway line from Armidale to Queensland border, and ask them to give their opinions and viewpoints in a kind of an informed way. And then, of course, explore different ideas for the restoration of the rail line, for revitalizing the communities like yours, and also explore the challenges and possibilities, as well as the benefits to be gained by doing so. And also, thirdly, to emphasize the communities like yours have a major choice to make, and also you have a voice to express. So that's the purpose of this particular forum. But then, of course, if I may say something briefly about what is Northern Railway Defenders Forum, we are some individuals and to some extent few organizations who are interested in this particular rail line and its future. And we have been doing a lot of research, deliberations since last year. In Armidale, we have been meeting fortnightly, and members like Matthew and Karin and Margaret and Rob Lennon and so on are members. And there are some members from Glen Innis also, like Sally Gilder, and also David Wren, if he is around. So we have been organizing some petitions to the government and the councils. Since last year, for example, in change.org, I organized one petition, and it has over 2,000 signatures by now. And of course, we submitted another one to the upper house of New South Wales Parliament early this year. It had about more than 1,000 signatures. And of course, as you may already have noticed, there's a paper petition organized by some other organization. I think it is passenger trains north of Armidale, or what is the passenger trains north of Armidale. There we are aiming at 10,000 signatures. I realize that we have passed 8,000 by now, but we are short of about another 1,000 or so signatures. So we encourage you to sign those funds. And also we conducted a survey, and the results we have summarized for you, and they are very informative as well. And in addition to that, we also make various submissions to the government. 1 minute? All right. So, in the 1 minute left, probably I will contribute more later on. We believe, in terms of our beliefs, we believe that we who live in regional New South Wales deserve better transport options compared to what we have or what we have not at present. And then we believe that governments can and should play a better role in this rather than leaving the councils to carry the can or the load. We believe that rail services should be a part of public transport, regional growth, connectivity, and human well-being. And then we believe that the existing transport options in Northern Tablelands or New England are grossly inadequate and poor. And we believe that our area has been neglected in terms of government investment in transport facilities. And New South Wales government approach to public transport or regional rail services is grossly inadequate compared to Victoria or Queensland. So these are some of the ideas we have from our forum. And one final point is there are a lot of negativities associated when we talk about this rail line or bringing back trains. But our approach is to go beyond those negativities and adopt a kind of a positive attitude towards this issue. So therefore, in our presentations today, we will be explaining to you some of the positive initiatives that different individuals and different organizations have been working on in order to bring some train services to this region. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to welcome Matthew Tierney to the lectern. Thanks, Matthew.
Right, so I think everyone can hear me at that volume. Is that okay up the back? Look, so the topic apparently for me is history and importance of the line, and I'll just get cracking on it. That's the line we're talking about. That's what we've got. Cleanliness is on this line, and of course there's no trains running anywhere on that line that we've got up there. Now, just to whiz through it as quickly as I possibly can, what people sometimes refer to as the Great Northern Railway, the main North Line, as it's called in the operation of the railways, made its way up in the late 19th century, and it got to Murrurundi in 1875, Tamworth in 1878, made it to Armidale in 1883, Glen here in 1884, and right up to Wollongara there at the border in 1888. And I heard someone before we started saying, but isn't the railway a different gauge in Queensland? Well, of course it is. The yellow bit there is all 3'6" gauge up in Queensland. But they had to build a bridge over the Hawkesbury River down here, which they did a year later, 1889. And from that time on, there was a main railway line from Sydney to Brisbane, and this was it. There's a map of the 1895 railway system, and you can see the north of the state is dominated by the line that we're sitting on here now. That was the way from Sydney to Brisbane. Now, the situation today, of course, is vastly different. I should just go back and say that in 1930, which I neglected to mention, they completed a standard gauge link from Kyogle on the border on the north coastline through to Brisbane. And so from 1930 onwards, you might say that the main North Line up here through the Tablelands was competing with a line that actually went all the way to Brisbane. You didn't have to get out and change trains or transship freight. Here we are today, and what have we got? Well, that wonderful main north line has got a great big 214 kilometre blob in the middle of it that's not functioning. It's not closed, I hasten to tell you, but it doesn't have any trains running. And that's really the history of where we got to today. We've still got narrow gauge up in Queensland. We've got standard gauge coming up here from Sydney to Armidale. We've only got passenger trains running north of Tamworth to Armidale at the moment, but it's a functioning railway line. And you might say, well, that's terribly interesting, but you should be talking in a museum. We're here to talk about whether this railway line has a future. What's history got to do with that? Well, I think recent history does help a little bit to give us some pointers as to what might happen to the line. That's the first little backward step that happened in 1972. I don't know who was around then, but until then, you could catch a train from Glen to Brisbane, changing at the border. In 1972, they just stopped running passenger trains between Tenterfield and the station at Wallangarra. And you've never been able to go by train direct from here to Brisbane since then. Then, just after I moved to Armidale in 1988, before they even got their report, the Greiner government axed all the mail trains, so you couldn't actually catch a passenger train north of Armidale from November 1988. All that was cut out. This is just passenger trains I'm talking about here. These lines were still open. There were still some freight movements. Then, after they implemented the Booz Allen and Hamilton report, they axed all those passenger trains. And even we Armidale folk were forced to catch buses down to Tamworth for 3.5 years. And that was the situation that prevailed for quite a while. People in Armidale are amazed to hear that. We didn't have passenger trains for a while. But there was still other activity on the line. There was still superphosphate running to Dumaric and even Glen for a while. Now, some events happened then that are quite important, and this is where I think they point to how a community like this, up here in this part of the tablelands, can think about the future of its line. Because Armidale and a lot of other parts of the north of the state, and Glen played a major part in this, I might say, didn't accept that it was losing its train. And I was part of this whole campaign that happened in 1989 and 1990. The then Mayor of Glen David Donnelly, came with us on a delegation to the Minister for Transport in Sydney at the time, February 1990. That was the crowd, large crowd, that saw what was allegedly the last passenger train out of Armidale on the 11th of February 1990. The upshot of all that was we got those trains back, and I've only got 1 minute to go, so I'll whip along. They tried to take them away again 10 years later in 2003. But our community in Armidale, nothing succeeds like success, I might tell you. And a community that's won its trains back, the first time it had ever happened in the history of New South Wales that a regional passenger train service was reinstated on a line from which it had been completely withdrawn. Armidale didn't like being told they were going to take them away again. There were 3,000 people at Armidale Station on a Thursday morning. So since then, there's been lots of studies on what to do. They've gradually lost all the freight. There's no superphosphate running to Dumaric or Glen anymore. That was one study that Steve Toms up here in the New England Local Government Group made a big contribution to, about how to get the railways going in the north of the state. Ernst & Young did this study where they announced that developing the inland rail line from Melbourne to Brisbane coming our way would cost $8 billion, and going out on the western inland route would cost $3.5 billion. Anyone here know how much it's actually costing at the moment for the inland line? Yes? Yeah, and it's supposed to be heading for $25 billion by the time they've worked out how to get it to the coast in Queensland. So very strange stuff. Here's one example of how we would see this line being developed. And if they don't go ahead with the inland line through Toowoomba, cutting across here, there's several other routes that you can go to get through to the coast. There's another one that was done. That's the Cunningham study in Queensland for how to get an east-west connection across, coming through along the border here between New South Wales and Queensland. That's the railway line at Black Mountain. And I just show it to you because it doesn't look too bad, does it? All right? So when you hear all this stuff about how our line's a complete industrial write-off, needs to be taken to the rubbish tip, I'm here to tell you, think again. That's the XPT back in 1984 when it came to Tenterfield. This railway line is a line that can take modern trains. Okay, and if it was built for the steam age, well, so were all the railway lines in Australia. And they're just gradually being developed and, adapted for modern operating. And I'm just going to indulge my chairperson here for 1 second, because I know I'm up to my second last slide, Madam Chair. I know there's some important leaders from the Glen community here tonight, and I want you all to look long and hard at that map. And if you find that you're a bit of an insomniac and you wake up at night and you'd like something to worry about to pass the time, worry about this, because that is the Regional Rail Infrastructure Projects map for New South Wales, published by Transport for New South Wales. And there are certain blank areas in the state where they don't even acknowledge that the railway lines exist. Big blank area down here where they've ignored Cooma as though it wasn't there. An interesting blank area up here where Lismore seems to have disappeared from the civilisation of New South Wales. And most alarmingly for us here tonight, this great big patch of white north of Armidale, where I think it's perfectly disgraceful that they don't acknowledge the existence of a railway line that is still a legal, open main line between New South Wales and Queensland. So there it is. Thank you, Madam Chair. There's your wonderful railway station, and I hope we can welcome trains back there pretty soon.
Thank you, Matthew. Is David Donnelly here?
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. Okay. Our next speaker is David Donnelly, and he's a former mayor of Glen 7 Council, and he's going to present a local view on that. David? Would you like to come up here? Where's he going? He's going the wrong way. Stay here. Speak up though, because the microphone's not on.
Okay, well, welcome friends, visitors to Glen, if I could say that. I haven't got that official role, but I'll say it anyway and acknowledge Rob Bannon there. So thank you all for making Glen your home for these. That's our visitors that I met years ago. And I should say that if we hadn't have had the effort, that very concerted effort over many years, and that's collectively from Tenterfield, Glen and Armidale, we may not have had that service to Armidale now, but not only Armidale people enjoy, but the people north and west and east and so on have access to. Other things like we have an overhead bridge at Glen Cove. Wouldn't have happened if it was close on. So it opens up the possibilities for where we're at now. And probably the cost of that would have been far, far less than what it would be now, considerably. So, and then we had the situation where floods washed out, I'm not sure just how much track, but quite a bit at Stonehenge. And a local chap involved in promotion of rail services said, they won't take any notice of me. What about you ring them up and see if you can get that rail reinstated? So I rang the State Rail and I said, look, you've got a real problem up here. There's all a section of track gone. And the chap on the other end of the phone said, we better do something about it then. We'll get crews up there right away and we'll see what we can get done. And it happened. So it's still there. It's still in place, not washed out. You've got a lot of speakers. I shouldn't take any more time, but thanks for the enthusiasm tonight, because it just goes to show that all those late nights and efforts travelling, in fact, over the state in various areas and promoting what we had and comparing notes with other people hasn't been in vain. And it's numbers that matter, and judging by the numbers tonight and the applause, I think we've got the train back on the tracks. Thank you all.
Okay, a man who seems to not need any introduction. Angus Witherby is a geographer, town planner, specialising in transport, among other things, and an economist. And he used to live in Armidale, but now he lives in Moree, and he has his own town planning business there still. And I'll hand over to Angus.
Thank you very much. I'm recycled, having been in and out of the New England Northwest since the mid-60s, various parts of it. Back in Moree, been there 7 years. We spent the last 7 years or so playing trains, largely inland rail. But related to that has been what we do about feeder lines, in particular, bringing back into use lines which are still open but are not functional. So I bring, I guess, why, like railways, I don't bring a romantic view to it at all, very much the hard-headed business. And my brief is to prepare a business case for reactivation of the railway line, initially from Armidale to Glen, that is a foundation to potentially go back to the Queensland border and provide long-term links through. The main thing that comes out of that is, what's it going to be used for? Now, a lot of the thrust of discussion has been on transport of people, but I want to talk about some of the practicalities from an economic point of view. Firstly, to put a railway line back into play, are we talking about the line having to cover its capital costs as well as its running costs, or its running costs only? This is a key question. If we can get grant funding to rebuild the infrastructure, then it's a much easier case to develop sufficient economic activity to keep that line in action. We've got a difficulty, and this was foreshadowed, with road versus rail. Roads don't recapture their capital expenses, but rail is expected to. If you look at the inland rail business case, it's about returning the capital back to government, which is why it's off the books from the federal government's point of view. Rail does need to have a viable business case. We're just going to build roads, largely. 1.01% cost-benefit ratio is sufficient, whereas rail, the expectation is much higher. So we've got mode discrimination. Nevertheless, I think it's reasonable to think about capital costs being grant funded. Brian will be speaking a little bit on the feasibility of refurbishing the line. But just as an example, if we look at the section of the Inverell line that was refurbished in Moree, that was about $1.3 million a kilometre. But that was new ballast, new sleepers, and new rail, plus signalling, etc. So the core question here is, how much do we need to restore it, and to what level before it becomes useful to us? And here we get the trade-off of speed versus capacity. If we accept lower speeds, we can get more weight. If we want higher speeds for the same track, the train has to have less weight. So we've got the ability here to look at what level of service we need from a new railway. And in my view, it needs to carry the same tonnage as the line from Armidale South, because that way you're making the best use of the existing rail infrastructure. This does raise the issue of transit times, however, and that's one of the questions that comes into the mix. One way of getting your levels of service up is progressive capital upgrades. The so-called replace one sleeper in 3, get it into action, and then as time goes by, you can replace more sleepers, spread your capital costs, etc. So you don't actually have to necessarily get that whole capital hit right up front. You can prove the case with a limited capital expenditure and then build from there. Over the next 15 to 20 years, there's forecast to be a 30% increase in freight movements in Eastern Australia. This raises the costs of providing that capacity by road as compared to by rail. The New England Highway Strengthening Project between Narrabri and Moree, 100 kilometres, same distance as between Armidale and Glen, is costing over $270 million just to strengthen an existing road. Based on that, 1.3 mil a K is loose change to put a railway in place. So this is where we look at what's the value proposition of rail compared to transporting that freight by road. And does that stack up in terms of covering your long-term maintenance and running costs? Passengers are nice, freight pays the bills. That's the reality with railways. We've got a proposal at Llangollen, which may potentially provide the catalyst for this. We've got the tomato farm, we've got inputs to agriculture and industry, fuel, fertiliser. We've got break bulk freight, which can be delivering to towns and communities along the way, stuff that comes by sending at the moment. So what does that demand look like? How would the costs compare to doing it by road? And does that stack up in terms of meeting at least a proportion of the operating costs? If we can find a model that gets us there from the freight point of view, and this is the icing on the cake. You can run your passenger rail, you can run your historic trains. If you want the Puppy Billy example, that has now become a commuter service. It's now a commuter service as well as a tourist attraction. So you can get the double whammy. The rail trail has been a core issue. There are problems with the costs of corridor maintenance, how this would be funded, whether they want full or partial control. Is it possible to get the rail trail and the trains in the same line? Very challenging. It's a narrow corridor, limited parallel opportunities, grades can be a problem. So it is a bit of an either or. And I did start by thinking, can we do both? It's really quite challenging. So in terms of developing the case, firstly, it's about scoping the Llangollen opportunity because that person has indicated they are willing to look at significant capital. Now, under the Fixing Country Rail program, Steve Broadbent out of Moree, he paid 1/3 of the cost of refurbishment of the line. The state government picked up the other 2/3. So a model where we get some private sector investment with double your money from the state government under the existing Fixing Country Rail program could actually work. We need to identify other potential users and we need one key business to commit. I look at Etamuga and the intermodal that went in there. The first business gave them 65% of the volume they needed for that to make sense. But that was enough for a private investor to commit, and it's grown the rest from there. Success attracts success. And the key thing here is if we're going to reactivate this line for freight, then we need to have affordable intermodal when we change mode from rail to get delivery to businesses. That's been a historical cost problem. But you can do an intermodal with containers, pick and place, slab of concrete, Bob's your uncle, drop the container in the yard of the super, unpack it the same way you would a semi, away you go. So what it says is that if we explore this range of uses, we've got a good probability that we can get enough of our costs back to make this viable. The value proposition, what are the tasks that can realistically be performed by rail? What are the avoided costs if we use rail, not road? And how does rail compare into the future? Rising fuel costs, decarbonisation, increased freight demand. And finally, what other possibilities can rail unlock? Now, inland rail went west for certain quite logical reasons, but on the other hand, notwithstanding their best efforts, bits of it are going to go underwater. And if I were a federal government, I'd be thinking belts and braces here. It's not going to be the coastal line. That's got its own problems. So while this would not achieve the time path from Sydney, Melbourne to Brisbane, an Inland Rail needs to do, if the Inland Rail becomes unserviceable, then this is actually a quite cheap backup. Yes, you may not get double stack containers. Yes, your operating speed will be down, but it could work.
This should get them overnight and not wait for a week for the water to.
Exactly. So from that point of view, my view is that there is a potential business case there. I'm starting to put some numbers together around that. I'm starting to look at what the freight demand might be. We'll be doing some survey work to identify potential businesses that could use it for freight purposes and what would cause them to change mode. We've done the same sort of thing with Inland Rail and Moree. Every single strand of cotton goes by truck to the Port of Brisbane. There is no reason why every single strand of cotton can't go by container to the Port of Newcastle. In Moree, we're looking at changing the bulk freight costs, of shifting from road to rail, potentially saving growers $58 a tonne. In a big season, we export something like 2 to 3 million tonnes of product. Now, we do the big grain stuff in Moree. Here's a bit different. But the principles of the value proposition are the same. Can we demonstrate cost savings to users and at the same time get enough money to make it viable to maintain a railway line and to reinvest capital in it so it remains a valuable asset in the future? Thank you.
Angus is a very informative speaker, but an unruly one because he didn't stand behind the lectern so that the live stream could film him and the
I never have.
He's not even shaped. No, he's not contrite at all. Our next speaker is Margaret O'Connor. She's a long-standing supporter of this campaign, Northern Railway Defenders Forum, and she's a councillor at Armidale Regional Council, and I'll hand over to Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear at this level? Can? Great. Yes, look, I am a councillor at Armidale Regional Council, and I've been there for 10 years watching this debate about the railway north of Armidale and connections, whether it's to Glen or all the way up to Brisbane, evolve. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the Mayor of Glen 7 and all the councillors that are here. Thank you very much. I don't stand here as an Armidale councillor. I don't represent them today. I just represent myself. Look, I've been given the task of talking about the opposite to what Angus spoke about, the big sky, the blue sky picture, I guess, the big picture. Look, I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to rip through it. First of all, I just want to indulge myself with a little anecdote about our former Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian. A long time ago, she came to Armidale when she was Treasurer of New South Wales and did a little presentation at a political meeting. And I quite cheekily said, look, I don't see very much there for the regions. And she was quite irritated. And she looked up at me and she said, because she was squatting down, pointing to how great the economy of New South Wales was, and she said, the regions have a voice, let them use it. And she was quite cranky, but it was a real lesson to me that the expectation that the New South Wales government based in Macquarie Street is going to be thinking about our transport needs is an unrealistic one. They're not. They're just not interested. There is no such thing as a transport plan for this region at the moment. It's up to us to do it. And as Matthew indicated, it's actually up to us to put together a transport plan. And I had that from the Shadow Treasurer, Dan Mookie. Sorry, got a few of those M names in my head. Look, that's the backstory. I don't want to look at the past. And I don't accept any of the statements that say it'll never happen. That's not a reason. That's not an argument. That's just actually nonsense, because railways and transport can change. And if you Google ARUP, A-R-U-P, an international consultancy firm on trains, it's a massive long description about the future of rail, and you see it being rolled out as a climate change strategy, taking freight off roads onto rail because it's so much more decarbonising. But you see it being rolled out right across the United States, China, Japan, and especially Europe. It's actually replacing domestic air travel. And so the notion that there is no future for trains in this region is an absolute nonsense. But having said that, I just want to whip through what our group has been working on, big picture. Look, one of the things that both of our councils have identified is that we really want to look at growth, and growth is going to happen because people are going to leave the capital cities, and they are, and Lismore people are already coming up here knocking on doors looking for resettlement. We're resettling humanitarian refugees, the Yazidi community. You can resettle older people. Glen in a 7 council has its own ambitions, but they require 2 things: good health services. If you look at the problems with the regional health inquiry that's just recently wrapped, one of the major reasons for the differential in health outcomes for regional people is the lack of transport, integrated transport. And I was listening to Bronnie Taylor, who's the new specially appointed Minister for Regional Health, saying exactly that. That's one of the limitations, transport. You and I know that if you live in Glen Innes, anywhere pretty much north of Armidale, you're probably going to be looking to Queensland for health services. And you should have the right to do that, but there's no transport to precisely. So I've got one more. Yeah. All right. So I've got a much longer presentation, but I can't do it. But basically, what we're looking at is growth, and we have to provide to future citizens. We have to provide something better than what we've got now, and it's not going to be on the road because the roads can't take it with the new weather patterns that we have. So another issue is cross-border economic zone. You've got the fastest growing region just over the border, and what's happening just south of the border? No transport, nothing. But the opportunity for a cross-border economic zone, something similar to what Moree has successfully pitched it for a employment development zone in Moree and has got government support for. We can pitch for that with Queensland. Under Section 96 of the Constitution, the federal government can give money to help us get trains running back across the border. I'm just going to, this railway line is a military corridor. That probably had no relevance in 1973 when we were all so carefree. But I think it does have relevance now when we're looking at a completely different foreign security system. There's cross-border opportunities with the Olympic Games in Brisbane in 2032. What planning are we doing to get some of that cash down into our region? So far, nothing, but we need to move in that direction. So there are new industries, and the thing I mustn't forget to say is tourism. Tasmania has already stated that it's full. It can't house another tourist. New Zealand is far away and also very mature. But this region, with all the national parks, the agri-tourism opportunities, all the different products that we now produce. I mean, just in Guyra, we've got mushrooms, peonies, a heap of new but interesting sector products that tourists would love to see. And there's just so many opportunities for tourism to develop. We're at a very early stage, really, in that, but that could be a major driver of our economies. And I think Glen Innes has many, many charms that I don't know about, but there's no shortage of cultural tourism. I don't want us to leave the lectern without mentioning First Nations. First Nations have not only a prehistory interest in the songlines that the train actually covers as it goes north, but they have a huge colonial, if you like, history in actually building the trains. It was many First Nations men and women who slogged their way to build this track back in the 1890s. So they can't be forgotten as well. Look, we have to build a regional renewal vision for ourselves. The Productivity Commission has chastised the state governments over several years for neglecting regional infrastructure to the point that Australia's productivity is actually nosediving because the regions have been left behind. So the time is now. And we're not talking about the past, we're talking about building our future. But we can't do that unless we have boots on the ground, literally, to come to meetings as you have. Thank you so much.
Is Brian Fisher here? Has Brian Fisher got here yet? No? Okay. Well, he was driving from Cootamundra in his car onto this meeting, and so I guess he hasn't got here yet, so we'll put him later. So our next speaker will be Rob Lenihan, who is president of the Save the Great Northern Rail Route Incorporated. And you're a GARA president, is that right, Rob? So he's bringing another regional perspective as well.
Thank you, Karen. Welcome, everyone, and it's pleasing to see quite a number here. As Karen said, I'm president of the Great Northern Railway Incorporated, but I'd like to take the opportunity tonight to just briefly outline a couple of groups that I'm involved with. The other one is the New England Railway Incorporated. I'm chairman of that currently, and I have some news from David Peters from On Track International Holdings, which I'll outline towards the end if time permits. The Save the Great Northern Railway group was formed some almost 8 years ago. It was formed after public awareness came out that the New England Rail Trail Group had a proposal to put a rail trail on the Great Northern Line between Black Mountain and Ben Lomond at that stage. And that proposal involved the removal of the rail and infrastructure for the formation of a rail trail, which I didn't agree with, and we formed a body, and it's all history now. As we formed, we attracted a good cross-section of the community, not only just in Guyra, but around the whole area. It included adjoining landholders of the corridor, leaseholders of the corridor, rural stock agents, farmers that weren't joined to the corridor, business owners and residents. And we have attracted a huge amount of support in the last 7 years. And as Siri mentioned, we have a petition still running with in excess of 8,000 signatories. And in recent months, we have aligned ourselves with the Northern Rail Defenders Forum, and they have actually included their membership with ours, which for the purpose of using our incorporation, which has been approved by the Department of Fair Trading. So that's about all I've got to say about the Save the Great Northern Rail Group. We're still there. The New England Railway Incorporated, I was invited to join the committee there, which I showed great interest in, and it only took a couple of weeks, and I was asked if I'd like to be the chairman, so I took the opportunity to do that. We're actually the group that owns the units sitting in Armidale that a lot of you have probably seen. Not looking in the greatest state at the moment, simply because of security issues down there are a bit of a problem for us, and we get repeat events of vandalism, which is disappointing. We are currently looking at having 2 driven units fully restored at Lithgow Valley Railway. We've had contact with them and arranged that. And whenever we're ready, we can have them transported by rail down to Lithgow for that. Of course, we've got to attract some funding from Adam Marshall, who's actually indicated he'd be keen to come on board with that. So we look forward to doing some negotiations with him. This body, prior to me being chairman, had an application in for access to the line north of Armidale to do a degradation study. As far as I know, that still hasn't been granted at this stage. It's been 2.5 years, I think, Jason, isn't it? Something around that. But in recent months, I know there's quite a sudden interest shown by a company called UGL, who have replaced the John Holland Group, who were responsible for the maintenance of rail lines in New South Wales. There's a new company called UGL taking that over, that contract. And in my other role as being in my own local area at Black Mountain, I'm Vice President of the Preservation Society, which actually have a lease on the the old railway station there. And we've been notified only a few weeks ago that a company called NRRC, which is Northern Regional Railway Corporation, will need access to our section of the line for a degradation study. So things are happening, and I'll carry on now with a report from David Peters, who is the owner of On Track International Holdings Corporation, which is a Polish-based company, 100% Australian-owned. They're producers of organic food and natural health products. They want to consolidate a spread of some 6 factories in 4 states across Australia, and their preferred site, after looking around all the eastern seaboard, is Llangollen. For the simple reasons, he needs high altitude, cool weather, low humidity. He likes the particular Llangollen site because it's reasonably level, heavy basalt soil, but more so for its immediate proximity to the New England Highway, and even more importantly, the rail line. He is prepared to refurbish the line to fit for purpose from Armidale at his own expense. He has consulted with rail trails specialists and builders who have estimated around $7 million cost for that section. He believes it'll be significantly less than that. This man has built railway lines all over the world. Fit for the purpose, I'll explain that. Angus touched on it pretty well there before. He needs, for his business, fit for the purpose, 25-tonne axle load capacity, which involves 1 in 4 sleeper replacement. There are no major bridges or main roads between Armidale and Llangollen, which would probably, and except for Guyra itself, the township, which is probably going to be a 30-kilometre speed limit anyway. The facility will employ 135 workers, 60 of which will be existing workers who have made a commitment to relocate their families from interstate, which means 75 new jobs will be available for locals of Glen, Guyra, Armidale, etc. David has already met with a few local producers around Guyra, hoping to source 70% requirements of his raw materials. In other words, lamb, beef, pork, chicken, and most regular vegetables. He is negotiating with Transport New South Wales regarding access to the line, and has told me as early as this morning that he's made significant progress in recent weeks. It seems a long, drawn-out process, but he is very confident that an announcement in his favour will be made by early December. Once access is Granted, David has very kindly offered to lease the line all the way to Glen to facilitate New England Railway and Corporation's intention to operate heritage trips to Glen He is keen to see this become a viable tourism venture. With an industrial subdivision just north of Armidale recently approved, there has been significant attention shown by other rail users, for example, the proposed abattoirs, a bulk fuel depot, which he is willing to support and even allow his facilities for loading. That'll do me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Has Brian Fisher arrived yet? No. So we will go on to our next speaker, Jason Russell, who is involved in the New England Railway Incorporated as well, amongst other things.
Thanks everyone. My name's Jason. I'm the public officer with New England Railway Incorporated. 12 months ago, we actually elected a new board to get on with the job of having the rail cars at Armidale restored to full mainline operational purposes. First thing we did was we actually developed a business plan, the 10-year plan. Then the next thing we did was we actually had someone from Lithgow Workshops, as Rob touched on, to assess the set that's in the sheds. We spent 5 hours going over from top to bottom, underneath, front end to the back end, and he actually stated, the gentleman who's got many years' experience in railway restoration, that the set that we have at Armidale, that's going to be the first one to go down, is actually in better condition than the one that was fully restored and being used at Byron Bay. So that's a plus for us. So our aim is to eventually have 3 sets operational. Not only do we want to run south to Werris Creek, over to Gunnedah, we also want to run north. To do that, we need the line to be brought back up to fit for purpose, which has already been explained. Our aim is to eventually be able to run as commuter service, same as what the Puff and Billy has eventually done, to provide service that is seriously lacking in this region. Public transport in this part of the region is virtually non-existent. An off-topic point, I will point out that from here to Brisbane takes over 8 hours from public transport. This day and age, that is not acceptable by any standard. And if you miss that option, which is just over 8 hours, it's over a day. Over a day, 24 hours it takes or more to get to Brisbane. It is. So currently we're trying to get grant funding to make things operational again. Depot security is a huge issue. Unfortunately, for the type of security that we need down there, it costs $10,000, which us as an incorporated association, we clearly don't have. Through grant funding, in-kind donations, membership fees, and other sponsorship sources, that is how we will eventually fund and get these units up and running. It's purely a volunteer membership at the moment. We have around 20 members. We do hope to increase that, and eventually we'll have open days where we'll be able to run heritage weekends with other heritage rail operators as well, such as Lachlan Valley Railway, Patterson Rail Motor Group, and the Hunter Valley, and actually have some sort of organised heritage weekend. I'm not saying anything like Steamfest, because that takes a lot of organisation, but we can also provide shuttle services for events in this area. So for people, say, live in Deepwater, want to come down for Celtic Festival here, we can run shuttles from Deepwater to Glen. We can do the same at Gyra for Lamb and Potato Festival and other various events that are here in the region, not only in Glen but in Armidale. For those that have been fortunate enough to go down to Armidale and get on the Lachlan Valley Railway tin hairs and do the dinner train to Walker Road, we actually plan to do the same. We have the support of those other heritage rail groups as well. We know for a fact that they do want to run up here. We fully support that. Eventually, once we get all 3 units up and running, then we'll be able to run midweek as well. But all this takes money. We have been successful with one of our grants so far, which I can't say where it's from because it hasn't been formally announced. But it was successful. We have another one we're waiting on, and we're currently in the process of making application for a further 2 grants to get the sets to Lithgow. So to get that first set to Lithgow, with costs of accreditation, training, track access, it's $400,000 just for 1 unit. That includes the full restoration of the unit as well, which was $250,000. Bear in mind that our unit at the moment was in better condition than the one that Byron Bay had done. So I don't know what they cost. The reason why we're going to Lithgow workshops is because they have better knowledge and they have the expertise to restore these particular types of heritage units. Where possible, we are engaging with local businesses and tradespeople. The grant that we actually have at the moment, most of that will actually go to local businesses in the Armidale area. So eventually we'll be able to run our heritage trains. Eventually it'll be a commuter service like Puffing Billy. Our aim is to run more often north than south because we identify that there is a lack of transport up here. Unfortunately, it takes money, it takes time, and we are in the process of doing all that. We're in a better position now as a group than what we were 2 years ago. So for people that would like to be a member, by all means, we have a Facebook page. Come up and see me after all the speakers. If you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them the best that I can. If not, email us. The email is on our Facebook page as well. The councillors and the acting GM this morning were all sent our business plan and an information sheet from Northern Regional Railway Company. And I hope that they've read all that information. We're not a fly-by-night operation. We are here for a long time, and we do hope that the rail line north of Armidale is reactivated and that we're able to run our trains north to provide a service for the community. Thank you.
So next we have, and it will be the end of our formal speakers for now until such time as Brian Fisher turns up. Next we have a double act by 2 Glen locals, or Sally's nearly Sally Gilder and Sue Waters, and they just want to share their passion with you for getting the train service back to Glen. Ladies, I'm not sure how you're going to share this microphone. Maybe I'll put it on Sue.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, so if you stand near each other, we'll catch Sally.
Sally, come up. Okay. Hello, I'm Sue. This is Sally. Some of you will know me when I'm wearing my other hat, which is a retailer down the main street. This is why I've been asked to come and just say a few words tonight. By the way, all for coming. I'm just blown away by how many people turned up here tonight. Sally is a landholder. She's also a local, and she actually has a property on the train line. The train actually goes through her place. What I want to just speak about briefly, don't you laugh at me? What I want to speak about briefly, okay, I don't have any qualifications. I'm not a trained person. I like trains, but I'm not a trained person. But I have people come into my business all the time and speak to me about the lack of public transport, specifically heading north, people who need to get to medical appointments who can't, people who have family members who, some of them live south and they can't get transport by the bus because they cannot get onto the bus. Others have family members who are north and they cannot get up to see them. It's very painful for them and it's isolating for them. So there's not only I think there's a community cost to us not having the train. It's not just the economics of, how much does it cost for a passenger ticket to get to Sydney or to get to Brisbane. It's the people that are feeling isolated. And we do have an ageing community. Many, many years ago, the Glen Council actually deliberately had a policy of trying to attract retirees to Glen. Well, they succeeded very well, but now so many of those retirees are isolated because they don't have family members here, they can't drive, and many of them can't physically get on the bus to go to catch the train south. So when they have medical appointments, what do? When they want to go and visit their family, what do? They're stuck. That's just what I wanted to say this evening. Okay, just as a local who talks to people all the time. And Sally, you have a few words to say about the train. About the train going through your property and what your feelings are about the whole thing.
It's an interesting concept when you have a train line in your backyard. And there's an expression out there called NIMBYs, which is not in my backyard. And you see it happening all the time. You see it with development through local council, you see it through renewable energy projects, you see it through coal mining, it's everywhere. And here we are talking about a train in my backyard. However, this is not a new project. I don't have to worry about the consequences of security, biosecurity, the effect on being a ratepayer, the safety on the track, the maintenance of the track, the access to the track, the trespass from the track. All of it is happened. We came to New England in the early 60s. We had a train running for 25 years and then we've had 30 odd years without a train. You get used to it. You just don't cross the tracks at that time. The fences were better, and when you live on a railway line, you expect a train. If you live at an airport, you expect a plane. If you live near the high school, you expect noisy school kids. So I'm keen, I think, for all the reasons mentioned by everyone here earlier, and thank them for their time and thank you for being here. A train is almost imperative for the growth of this little tiny white patch that Matthew put up on a slide. And as a landholder, we can cope with it. There for the corridor, which is not the subject of tonight. And as a landholder, we probably can't cope with it.
That's right.
It's a whole new issue of how the conversation and the negotiation goes about. Best we're dealing with state government on state government infrastructure. and let's hope the train returns. Thank you.
Oh, okay. You're ready. Okay, that's.
Unfortunately, it would seem that one of our key speakers has not arrived yet. So what I'm going to propose is that if and when he does arrive, we'll give him his chance to speak, given that he would have driven 7 hours to get here. But in the meantime, I'd like to open the floor now to questions and or brief comments from members of the audience. Some of you may have questions for particular speakers that you want more information from, so you can identify them if that's the case. Some of you may have an open-ended question, and we'll figure out amongst the speakers which of them, maybe more than one, would like to answer it or respond to comments as well. A microphone. Oh.
I've got to get close to the people talking, otherwise I won't.
Oh, do you want to go over here?
I need to get on a handheld thing.
We're just going to have a short pause
2 minutes.
while the cameraman reorganises his setup, because he'd like to film the members of the audience who are asking questions or making comments. So put your thinking caps on now and think about what questions you'd like to pose or what comments you'd like to make, and be very quick. Yeah. Oh, I can use this. Hang on. Glen is present.
We are having a couple of minutes break at the moment before the start of question time.
Yeah, well, we're going to start.
I'm just going to quickly run. I have to get about
If I could call the meeting to order again. Our cameraman is ready to be a roving cameraman now. He's detached his camera from its tripod and he's going to go up to whoever's posing questions or making comments from the audience. So if you just put up your hand, if you've got a question or comment, there's one over there, Lucas. So if you go over, you keep your hand up so Lucas can see where you are.
Yeah, look, I've got a letter from a friend.
Okay.
And this reflects his experience as a disabled person and not being able to get transport.
What's your name?
Sorry, David Wren. Hold on, I just got lost my phone. Worse than one's handbag. Right, this is from Jan van der Velde. Jan lives at Red Range. His injuries to his back mean that he's got scoliosis. He cannot sit upright for more than 45 minutes at a time. So for him, a bus, he can't even get on the bus, let alone travel. So I'll just dig this out. Yeah, sorry about this. Hold on. It says, "Hi David, can you do me a favour and bring this email to the attention of the organisers of the railway meeting? I'm in favour of reinstating the railway for several reasons. My name is Jan van der Velde. I'm a male and living in Red Range and I'm 74 years of age. I'm giving you the reasons not only for myself but also for a lot of elderly and physically handicapped people who are forced to not be able to travel because of a lack of public transport. Glen is a town with a large number of elderly people who do like to go to Armadale and or Tamworth for a day out. And more elderly will be locating to this area, especially after all the floodings over the last couple of years. Because of my physical disabilities, as you said, David is my permission to explain, I have a problem even driving from Red Range to Glen Innes. Driving to Armadale upsets my whole body because of the position sitting too long. The condition of New South Wales roads are not even taken into account. The bus service is not good, often booked out, especially during school holidays, or not on time, depending on the weather if places are flooded. I will have a problem getting on the bus with my wheelie walker, then the seats are too crammed and the travel time involved. When a rail system is reinstated, then I only have to drive to Glen Innes railway station, hop on the train. I can walk onto the train, sit in comfort and no stress driving. Also, I can get up and walk a bit, and if I have to use the toilet, it is quite simple. So, if anybody thinks you can be a disabled person and go to the toilet on a bus, think again. The other thing is that the government He's always talking about safety on the roads.
Yeah.
So when it's simply one train can haul the equivalent of several trucks, which means less accidents, less killed truck drivers from being forced to drive too long and no rest. Then the cost of fuel for one train is less than those trucks combined. I know there are people who do not live in the real world and think that making a bicycle track would bring tourists to Glen. When I was still able to drive to Armadale, very seldom did I see people on bicycles. The people who think about bicycle track only think about themselves now and not when they are older and infirm. These clowns come with silly ideas to spend taxpayers' money on a small group of people just for political purposes. I hope you will take note of my email and I wish you all the best to get the trains going. With kind regards, Glen Barnaval. Thank you.
Do we have another question or comment? Here's one, Lucas, over here. If you just wait for him to come, thanks. Okay, thank you.
My name's Jeffrey Blake, local. Thank you for a great presentation, by the way. Very informative. For our history buff over there, one of the reasons the Great Northern Line come up over New England was the permanent border at the Mother of Ducks Lagoon Forest as a little history. And we almost had a private spur line from the mines at Emerald into Deepwater, but the war come along with prices drop. But getting to the point, I'm actually one of these people that is quite keen on the rail trails. Now, I think we can all agree it is currently a stranded asset. Like it really has. It's been like 34 years, whatever. So I actually have been, well, I'm not part of any official group, but I have taken a strong interest in the rail down through the years, the various committees and the various proposals. And yeah, just keep an open mind. If this doesn't, there's obviously competing ideas. Ecotourism does have a place. It's low impact and it's mainly walkers and hikers and cyclists. Someone mentioned Tasmania. I go down there quite regularly. They do have, they do it very well. New Zealand. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. But yeah, there's more than one view out there. So thank you very much.
Okay, who's next? Oh, that's Brian, isn't it? Yeah. Just before Brian comes up, Brian's collecting himself. You can come up to
My name's Shane Boyd. I'm a director of a company called New England Innovation and Development. We've got a proposal for the abattoir that we're proposing in Gyra. We've been given a DA from the Armadale Council for an industrial subdivision also in Gyra as well. And our company is very pro-rail because if we get this abattoir up and running, we believe that we can utilise it for containerisation down in Newcastle for chilled meat. That's for one thing. But my question, of course, is you hear lots of rumours and innuendos and stuff like that. And I'm led to believe that there are councils who have received funding for the rail trail. So my question would be, it seems like the rail trails seem to fait accompli, and I suppose these councils here, has there been funding for the rail trail? And if in fact we're able to turn that around and turn it back into a fit for purpose rail line, what then happens to the funding that these councils have been given for the rail trail?
Is there another question or comment? Yes.
Excuse me, I think that should be answered.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't realise. Was it a question? Yes. You asked it.
I can possibly answer that question.
Well, I guess I'll answer that question to the best of my ability. Look, there has been promises of funding, but they're subject to a whole lot of additional studies. I know that our council is in the process of actually re-evaluating the viability and the actual desire for that, given the clear wishes of the community, which are not necessarily in favour of that as the only way of activating economic development. It's a very, very narrow band of ecotourism. One thing I didn't have time to say in my speech was that one of the ideas that our forum has been working on is actually having trains that go up and down this line, limited initially, that will actually open up, have a bicycle carriage, a ride-on, ride-off, such as they do in the Netherlands, which is a very big bicycle thing. There's no doubt that cycling is a really, really popular and excellent activity, and we support it either by way of a side-by-side track, bicycle track beside any functioning railway line, or alternatively ride on the train, take your backpack on, have your bike push on a carriage, and then the whole of this New England high country is open for trail bicycle rides down the national parks. I mean, it's a longer term, more visionary picture, but I think in the end it allows for multi-use. And one of the things that's happened in Byron Bay recently is they've just done a study on multi-use of the track, and I think that's what's happened is there's been a sort of fast, if you like, and to some extent behind the scenes applications. So I know one of them was done when we were under administration for funding for a rail trail. But, you know, there's definitely a move for reconsidering that in our council. I can't speak for Glen in a 7, of course.
Margaret, my question more or less, and I don't want to direct it to you because...
No, I just volunteered for a difficult question.
But the fact is that I'm led to believe, and I'm happy to be corrected, that some of the councils have received funding. The councils are very pro-rail trail, pretty much against. Your mayor is very pro-rail trail.
But he's only one vote.
But I know he's only one person, and he could apply for funding. I'm led to believe Glen Innes Council were very pro-rail trail and have in fact received funding, or I'm led to believe they've received funding. If in fact it doesn't turn into a rail trail, can that money that they've applied for, that they've received, be used to make it fit for purpose as a railway line?
Sorry, no.
Yes, we've received funding. We've got $2.9 million in funding. But if we don't use it, it goes back to the government. You can't change it from where it's been allocated. Right. And the same with you guys. You've been allocated money for a certain part of the rail trail. So, and I'm pro. But that's common knowledge. That's common knowledge. Yeah. But that money's, we've got that money. It's common knowledge that the money will go back.
And how long have you got before you make a decision?
We have a set time. Hang on, but the state government's in regards to what's happening with the rail, they've put that act through. And correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret, but the act that's just gone through.
I believe the act was to allow the minister to have the final say in regards to whether it becomes a rail line or a rail trail.
To stop every individual rail trail having to have a go and apply. It covers all of it.
So he had the final say, basically.
But the money goes back. Can't be utilised anywhere else. Same with any grant. It's got to be utilised on what it's proposed to do or it goes back.
I just want to, I don't disagree with what the Glen 7 Mayor said, Rob, and I thank you for that. It's true that if you get money and you decide not to use it for whatever reason, it does go back. But that doesn't mean that's the end of the line. If you have another project down the track that would serve the same purpose, which in this case was economic development post bushfires, then you're really in the box seat to apply to get that money back in a separate, different round. So nothing's fixed in stone, but that's the answer to that question. Yeah, that specific funding would be withdrawn or returned, but then there's the opportunity to negotiate for something new, better, different.
If I can make a quick word here, my name's Mary Cambridge, and my comment is that take the trucks off the road, put them on the railways, the roads will then become more safe or safer for both vehicles, motor cars and bicycles or anybody who wishes to use it. And also as far as maintenance is concerned, it might be costly to repair the rail for starters, but the ongoing maintenance is a lot less than the money they're spending on road week after week, year after year, and they no sooner patch a segment of road, section of road, and it needs redoing again. So unfortunately, the repairs they do to the roads are not permanent, whereas if they fix the railways, at least they'd get more value for money in their maintenance. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. And I'd like to add to that response to that question before about what will happen to the money for the rail trail. Some of you may know that early this year, in June exactly, the New South Wales Parliament passed a bill called Rail Trail Bill 2022. According to that bill requirements, and also along with that, there is another document called criteria. When a council applies for permission or support from the government, they have to follow. They have established a certain criteria that the councils will have to follow. In that criteria, there are three components. One is the council, particular council has to submit a credible business case, and the second one is council has to show community support for the rail trail, and the third one is that there has to be a proper biosecurity assessment. So it is outlined. Actually, I have in my file a copy of that as well, but it is a very lengthy process. But the question is, now that the funding has been allocated to both councils, the question is whether these two councils will be required under this new legislation to resubmit their application or whatever according to this plan. It's called Rail Trail 2022 plan, action plan or something. Thank you.
Any other, are you ready? Is this what you want
Yeah, I'm happy to go.
to do? Okay,
I don't really have anything prepared. But I'm happy to
that's all right. I'm
talk to
sure
people
you
about
know enough about
it. I'm happy to show people images.
Karen will ring a bell after a certain number of minutes, and then you have to.
Can you stand? Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. So you have a little rest while we talk to them.
Yeah, I'll go.
Here is what
Brian, before you want to come The cameraman is putting his camera back on the tripod because he needs a rest. Because he can't carry it around any longer, so we're just waiting for him to put it back on.
Anyway, you'll have to keep it brief because the audience is getting.
Can you wait till after this speaker? Thank you. You ready, Lucas? Okay. Right, you come and stand next to me and I'll just introduce you.
Okay, no worries.
happy to announce that Brian Fisher has driven all the way from Cootamundra.
Cowra.
Brian is a great enthusiast for bringing back rail services, not just in his own community, but throughout Australia. And that's why he's been willing to travel all this way to Glen to tell us about his passion for this project and to share his expertise, because as I said in the program, Brian was a New South Wales railway track manager for 17 years and nearly 500 kilometres of tracks. So he knows what he's talking about. I'll hand over to Brian. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, I'll just give a bit of background. I've had an association with the railways all my life. My father was a train driver at Cowra. He was a train driver there. He worked there for 35 years, started as a call boy, riding around a push bike, waking up train drivers. Then he became a fireman, firing steam engines from Cowra up to Dumondrel, breaking the steam engines out at the end of it. And then he progressed up to train driver, and he saw the transition from steam to diesel and diesel electric locomotives. I used to drive the rail motors, 42-footer rail motors. We had rail motor number 38, it was one of a kind at Cowra. Drove 600 class, 620 class, 900 class, 1200 class rail motors. Back in those days, railway was a big thing. That the yard at Cowra would shunt 24/7. It was full of freight. You'd have fuel, you'd have wool, you'd have livestock, wheat, and you'd have parcels. And it was 24/7. They'd have 2 wheat trains to Grenfell every day during the harvest and peak. Out to Yarra, out to Tradbury, Goolagong. So wheat was a big thing for the Cowra district. He retired in about, I think it was around 82. They closed the line in 83. He retired with 2 years long service leave. He was 58. They closed the line 2 years later. Yeah, I've seen the railways at their prime and seen the demise of railways. And, a lot of the decisions have been taken without community consultation. I think a lot of people didn't want the railways closed. They've never been asked whether they wanted them closed. And unfortunately, there's been lots of conflicts of interest, dare I say corruption. And, you know, I think some people don't sort of define corruption properly, because corruption takes various forms, and what might not seem corrupt is. So when cost analysis has been done, they've not been done properly because they haven't looked at the cost of road maintenance and road upgrades. Bitumen is simply not up to the task of what we've seen on the roads today. We've got B-doubles, got about 30 B-double log trucks going through Cowra every day, going from Bathurst up to Tuman. There's a railway line there, it's been there for 100 years. Still sitting there, it's got steel sleepers in it, it's heavily tied with steel sleepers. Wouldn't take much to get it back open. The road transport industry has a lot of influence. But then again, there are people in the road transport industry that are pretty savvy and they're partnering with rail. Linfox has got a intermodal parks. You've got companies like Scott's and Lindsay and other road transport industry companies that are partnering with rail, and it's rather than being a threat to the road transport industry, it's an opportunity there to be had. And what we need to see is a facilitation of a partnership between road and rail, and we're seeing that by way of intermodals. There's intermodals going up all around New South Wales, down at Tabletop, at Emoga, at Albury, Wagga, Cootamundra, Werris Creek. So there's intermodals going, there's parks, intermodals going up right around the state, which is facilitating a road-rail partnership. And what rail does best is long distance, and what road does is best is short distance. And we can partner the two and get them working together, complementing each other. That's the way forward. As I said, rail's not a threat to the road transport industry. It's actually an opportunity there to be had. And hopefully we can, keep that momentum going. I've inspected the Mawullumbar line. I've inspected this line. I've walked both lines for the full length taken photographs of all the primary issues. Same with the Caroline, where I come from. We've got Blaney to Demondre, it's been closed, had some washaways, and it's remained closed, and now it's at risk of being, young council wants to rip it up for a bike trail, which is crazy. Wait till they do that, won't reopen. The Mawullumbar line now is being ripped up as we speak. It's still sleepers, 80-94 pound rail, it's criminal what they're doing. What should have happened is what was originally planned. The Mawullumbar line opened all the way through to Brisbane via the Gold Coast. Had that happened, it never would have closed. Now, the Gold Coast motor rail was generating $33 million a year. 22 million of that was profit, 200% profit. That's unprecedented. The Gryner government canned the Gold Coast motor rail and replaced it with an ill-suited XPT. That sealed the fate of that line. And then, of course, it was the Carr Labor government, Michael Costa, who eventually closed the line. But the death knell to that line had been dealt by the Gryner government in cancelling the Gold Coast motor rail.
Gryner government closed this one.
Sorry?
Gryner government closed this one.
Yeah, that's right. It closed this one too. Gryner had, I don't know if he had a bad day at Central Station or what it was, but he didn't like rail. But then he worked for Lakers and some of these other road companies, so maybe there was a conflict of interest there.
I think he and Lindsay had a dinner date.
But yeah, he decimated rail, and people are paying for that now. The road maintenance costs, I think, we're spending around $70 million a year for road maintenance. Bitumen, you've got bitumen versus steel, basically. There's steel, there's rail on the main south, which where I was track manager. It's 75 years old. It's got about 90,000 gross tonnes of traffic a day. Now that's 75 years old. Now you're lucky to find bitumen 75 years old, let alone carrying that sort of traffic. It's horses for courses. And so basically I started in '86 as a fettler at Wallerawang, and I progressed my way up to gang, a track supervisor and track manager at Harden. I had really 400 kilometres of track infrastructure and 33 staff. I had main south from Downing through to Wollongong, Downing's near Yass and Wollongong's near Kitabundra. I had Demondre to Blaney, Geelong to Boora, Crew to Grenfell, and Carry to Eugowra. Carry to Eugowra was approved to go all the way to Parks. That should go ahead. That approval is still there, actually, government approval. So if they wanted to open that line up, and they could. And there's an opportunity there to link it with inland rail. As it stands at the moment, we've only got one line linking Queensland with New South Wales, and that's the North Coast line. So we effectively have only one rail link between the two states. Now that's crazy. If we have floods, all rail traffic stops.
It floods out.
Sorry?
I said that's the coast one, it floods out.
Yeah, it floods out all the time.
Ours doesn't.
If you have a derailment, the line stops. Now, it's single line, by the way. It's not double line. It's single. It's bi-directional single line. So basically, traffic runs both ways on that one line. On the main south, where I was, we had multiple lines. We had an up main and a down main. Down main is traffic away from Sydney to Melbourne. Up traffic is traffic from Melbourne to Sydney. And by having that sort of system, you can have trains follow close behind, and they're separated by automatic signalling. When the train clears the section in front, the light goes to amber, and then it goes to green. Manages the
passenger has priority.
Generally, yes, priority. What will happen is a freight train will go into a loop siding and allow the passenger to pass. Now, the XPT can travel at 180 kilometres an hour, so that's not too bad. I've travelled on the Redalban Plains and it has wound up pretty well. So anyway, the rail size here is 80-94 pound rail predominantly. Rail size talks about the weight of the rail per, in the old days it was pounds per linear yard. And they've certainly done a conversion, metric conversion, now it's kilograms to pounds to yards, and now it's kilograms to metre, linear metre. And that's how you describe the rail size. There's different rail profiles depending on the manufacturer, but they don't vary that much. So the rail size all the way to Wollongara is, except for a small amount of 71.5, which is pioneer size rail, which you get rid of. 71.5, that's right, 71.5. And but it's predominantly 80, 94 pound rail. Now people say, oh, I spoke to a politician up here, I think she might have been mayor or something. She said, oh, you've got to upgrade that line to 21st century track. The reality is the Canberra line is 80, 94 pound rail. From Jogga Junction to Canberra is 80, 94 pound rail, still sleepers. The current track from Werris Creek to Armidale is 80, 94 pound rail. So it's the same size rail. I looked at it and I decided that probably the quickest, cheapest and best way to get this line open was to use timber sleepers. Now people say that's, but timber's a renewable resource. When I was track manager, we were paying $28, the government was paying $28 a sleeper, iron bar sleeper, pre-board. Okay, such was the buying power of the government. We paid like 17 cents for Roundup a litre or something like that. Because of their buying power, they're able to get massive discounts. So even if you worked on, say, 30, if you're going to buy sleepers for this line, there'd be economies of scale. I worked on $30 a sleeper, and then I doubled that for labour. So I worked out $60 a sleeper installed. Now, there's sleepers are spaced at 600, steel and timber are spaced at 600 centimetres. Concretes are 700. So there's, to work out how many sleepers you need in a kilometre, it's, I'm telling you now, divided by 0.6. That's, I should know this off the top of my head.
Told you he was an expert.
I walk around that figure in my head.
1.6 million.
And he's got fatigue.
You just move the decimal point, I think.
He's almost given me us.
Yeah, it's about 1,400, that's right. Yeah, 1,600. There's 1,600, 1,666 per kilometre. The concretes is less, obviously, and it's it's only 1,400. Because the concretes are stronger, they don't require as many. So 1,428 sleepers a kilometre. Okay, so I work on a 1 in 3 pattern. That means every third sleeper we would replace. Now, if we did that, that'd bring the tie pattern back to 1 in 2. Okay, so we divide 1,666 by 3. What do we go? 16 divided by 3. Okay, so that's, I was working on 555 sleepers a kilometre. Now, if we times that for the distance from Armidale to Wollongara, and I did that the mileage.
214.
Is it 214 kilometres?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just do the sums there.
You get 119,000 sleepers.
Yeah, so
16.
Six equals. Okay, we need 924,000. 630. Yeah.
And $60.
We need that many sleepers, nearly 1 million sleepers. Okay, now if you don't times that by 30, well, you've got $30 million.
Oh, 30.
Hang on, no, that's not right.
Hopefully it's less.
No.
How many trees?
Sound like you work for the government, sir.
So 121. Sorry, did you say? Sorry?
214.
214.
Times 555.
That's better. 118.
Only replacing every third.
I don't know where I got that figure from. It's 118,000.
Much better.
Yeah. No, because I come up with about 6 million in store, I think. I was looking at the top number, that's what I was doing. 770. Okay. That's how many sleepers we need.
Yeah, times 60.
So, yeah, times 60, correct. And that gives us $60 a unit cost installed. So, yeah, 7.1 million to tie one of the three ironbark sleepers. That's installed. So, that's for the 25 blocks.
We've got a few bridges.
Concrete's 136 each. That's for Rottler at Grafton. That's delivered within the local. But the quickest and easiest way to get the line open is to use timber. Get a free board. You can use all the existing sleeper plates. Reuse the dog spikes, reuse the mod spikes. And yeah, so we've got 7.1 million to tie it. I mean, even if you're around 10, I mean, it's not a lot of money.
It's not a lot of money.
Not a lot of money. And the rail's good, the track geometry is good, the ballast is good. One of the really good things about this area is it's you're on the Great Dividing Range and it's dry climate. It's dry climate. And so not much work to do, drainage works. Bit of a clean up, you get a ballast regulator machine in. It's got a rotary steel wire brush, a steel wire broom head on it. It's hydraulically driven. You go along and clean all the overgrowth off. Any ballast shortages, you bring back up with the regulator. You can drag all the ballast back up with the cattle, knocked it down over the years, that sort of thing. But very little minimal ballast required. Bit of drainage work, bit of cutting work. The ticket items are going to be the bridges. You've got a bridge at Glen. It's a ballast top bridge. And, ballast top simply means that the top. With timber bridges, you've got ballast logs, what they call ballast logs, on either side. Then you've got the ballast, then the track sits up on the.
It was pretty good. It's in pretty good condition just driving past it.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
It's the one at Tamco that's the problem.
It would be cheaper to fix those timber bridges than replace them. The one at Sunnyside is a different story, and the one at Deep Water is a different story, because the one at Deep Water, it's a ballast top bridge.